Hello and welcome to today's Global Fleet Champions webinar on journey scheduling and routing and the impact on driver behaviour, sponsored by TrackMate. Global Fleet Champions is a partnership campaign administered by Brake, the road safety charity, to prevent deaths, injuries and pollution caused by vehicles driven for work. To learn more about the campaign and what we do, visit globalfleetchampions.org. During today's webinar, we will discuss how drivers react to different road types, how to schedule journeys for safety, how technology can help you, and what good journey scheduling and routing policies look like. In a minute, we will present you with a multiple choice question poll so we can find out your views on this topic. It is anonymous. Simply select one answer and press confirm, and we will discuss the results at the beginning of the Q&A session, which is your opportunity to ask today's presenters a question. You can put forward your questions at any time during the webinar by using the chat box on the webinar panel. I'd like to say a big thank you to today's sponsor, TrackMate. The poll question will appear on your screen shortly, and the webinar will then begin. Thank you.
Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us on this webinar today. I'm Matthew Newman. I'm one of the route optimization specialists here at TrackMate, and I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes talking about how careful route planning is a crucial aspect of fleet management and how it can have important knock-on effects, especially regarding drivers' behaviour and safety. So what is the problem? Although it may appear to be a simple task, driving is one of the most complex challenges your brain can undertake. Processing 11 million pieces of information per second, the brain constantly balances coordination and spatial awareness to help navigate a journey to completion. One comprehensive study of London taxi drivers showed that parts of their brains were growing in size to accommodate all this extra information that their brains were processing. TrackMate's big data, which connects over 250,000 vehicles, shows that a high percentage of drivers can spend up to 10 hours a day driving, which means drivers having to process billions of pieces of information, and this is why driving causes so much fatigue, which impacts drivers' behaviour and safety. A recent report from Brake showed that as many as 20% of all road collisions are caused by driver fatigue, with 1 in 8 drivers surveyed admitting to having fallen asleep at the wheel. Further statistics reveal that 4 in 10 tiredness-related crashes involve a commercial vehicle. Some serious statistics there. As well as the normal challenges of driving, many commercial vehicle drivers face additional problems, such as planning multiple journeys to coincide with arriving at specific times, making sure their vehicle is loaded correctly so unloading can be efficient, planning scheduled breaks throughout their journey, and also non-scheduled toilet breaks, which we all know is not pleasant. We've all been on a motorway looking for where that next stop is. Keeping their managers and customers updated with estimated times of arrivals, making sure they avoid congestion zones, low emission zones, even toll roads, making sure that if they're driving an electric vehicle, they have the added pressure of making sure that they have enough charge to complete the journey. And if not, where do they charge the vehicle? And is that extra time allocated into the journey time? You know, we've all heard of range anxiety. Also personal challenges, sleeping issues, home life problems, worries, mental well-being. You know, these are all issues that we suffer from time to time and we need to address. Layering more complexities into what is already an arduous task brews a cocktail recipe for disaster. Drivers under additional pressures show more risky driving behaviours, such as speeding to get to one task to the next to make up time, harsh braking as they approach traffic, risking rear-end collisions and accelerating heavily away again, leaving their vehicle parked in a dangerous position, again, due to time pressures, potentially jumping red lights and not taking care of pedestrian crossings and not taking care when pulling out into traffic, again, because of time pressures. So what does a successful journey look like? Checking the vehicle is safe to drive before starting the journey, making sure the journey drive time is actually achievable and breaks are scheduled throughout the journey, making sure the driver does not have to drive any unnecessary mileage. Avoid areas such as busy city centres, schools and congestion zones, if possible. Make sure EV range is not exceeded. Automate customer engagement by sending ETAs via email and SMS and other methods. Use satellite navigation with real-time traffic notification to avoid unforeseen traffic. Using devices to capture proof of delivery. And using integrated telematics and cameras to check if the driver and the vehicle are okay. So how can TrapMate's technology help? Simplicity for the driver to undertake a walk-around vehicle check specific to the vehicle they are driving, giving the driver confidence that the vehicle is roadworthy and eliminating time-consuming paper trails so the driver can start their journey stress-free and relaxed. Setting up dynamic working time profiles to include driver break thresholds and driver break durations. The optimization algorithms will take these breaks into the driver's journey, ensuring that the driver knows when to take the breaks and informing their manager that the break has been taken. TrapMate's Insight Route Optimization Management software has been designed to take the hassle out of route planning for drivers. Planning loading times based on the depot and the type of load, delivery durations based on the delivery address, using speed profiles based on the type of vehicle and taking into account average road speeds. This leaves the driver with all the headspace they need to focus on driving safely. Setting up geo-fenced exclusion zones. These can be used not only to restrict the driver's planned route through running through congestion zones, but also busy built-up areas such as schools, colleges and universities. Temporary exclusion zones can be used to restrict travel through areas where sporting events, music festivals, or where other large public events are taking place. Set up automated customer communications. The driver does not have to stress about keeping the customer up to date with the progress of the delivery or appointment. Communications can be sent when the delivery, collection or appointment is planned and subsequently in real time, keeping the customer up to date with the progress of the journey. Real-time satellite navigation should be used to redirect the driver in unforeseen traffic or road closures. The TrapMate Insight Driver app is satellite navigation agnostic. The driver can choose to use their preferred solution, whether that's Google Maps or Waze. There is no need to enter a postcode into the satellite navigation. All the driver needs to do is select the address within the Insight Driver app, and it will automatically direct the driver to that next location. The Driver app has an intuitive proof of delivery process, allowing the driver to capture photos and a signature of the delivery, collection or appointment. Automatically capture and report crash and incident events. This data and footage is available in real time to view in the TrapMate Insight system and can also be pushed through to third parties such as police, accident management companies and insurers to speed up the claims process and to stop unnecessary costs escalating. The driver can also capture all the necessary information through the Insight Driver app, and this information is available to their managers through the TrapMate Insight system, again avoiding the need for a lengthy paper trail. Driver behaviour reporting provides visual indications of how well the driver is driving based on speed, braking, cornering, acceleration, RPM and throttle use. Visual and audio driver coaching tools are used to feedback this information in real time to the driver. TrapMate uses a simple scoring metric to assist drivers to become a safer, more efficient road user. TrapMate are also making advanced driving assistance systems, ADAS, functionality a reality. We can monitor driver distraction by monitoring high-risk behaviours and alert the driver, such as when they are not looking in a straight head position for more than 3 seconds. Driver fatigue warning monitors the driver's eyes to identify if they are closed for greater than 1 second and if they are drifting away from the forward position. Forward collision warning monitors the distance and closing speed to the vehicle directly ahead, warning the driver if a collision becomes likely. These all ensure that the driver is kept as safe as possible. We call this TrapMate Connected Care, real-time monitoring of vehicle health. As well as proactively monitoring the driver's behaviour, we can proactively monitor the vehicle's health through our connected care telematics solution. Details such as true odometer, diagnostics, trouble codes, and battery health can be seamlessly shared with you and your vehicle leasing partner to proactively help service and maintain your fleet of vehicles. Again, giving the driver peace of mind that the vehicle they're driving is automatically reporting any issue it may have. If you would like to check out TrackMate Solutions, then we're offering free trials of our software to all attendees of today's webinar. Please contact me to find out more information, and I'm gladly assist you in setting up those trials. Be glad to hear that that's all from me. Thank you for your time today, and hopefully I'll speak to you soon. Bye.
Hi everybody, and welcome to my section of this webinar, which is looking at scheduling in terms of how it affects a driver for his health and well-being. I'm Alison Moriarty. Some of you may know me. I'm the Fleet Risk Director for Driive Consulting Limited, but from an operational background, having worked with several large multidiscipline fleets such as Skanska and Driive Bus. So this is something that's very, very close to my heart. And I think these are the questions really that I'd sort of like to cover today. And that's because I'm very keen on looking at things like fatigue. So that's my sort of focus, I guess, looking at scheduling. And I think these are the questions that maybe if you've either not done scheduling before, or if you just want to understand maybe how you can do it better, are probably the things that we need to look at. So starting with the first one, which is why are we talking about scheduling? And as I said, one of my real passions is making people safe on the roads, and I think scheduling is a big, big part of that. And when we look at some of the figures, particularly around fatigue, ROSPA did a really good piece of research a few years ago, and it shows that almost a fifth of collisions fatigue is a contributory factor. And we're saying a fifth, but there will be many, many more collisions where fatigue is a factor, but either the driver or the investigation maybe doesn't show that when at the conclusion. So just taking a fairly recent year, 2018, where we've got the stats for it, you know, it doesn't take much for you to realise how important eliminating fatigue is when you're seeing there over 24,500 people have had some sort of road crash because of fatigue. And also probably an even more worrying factor is that a quarter of all fatal and serious injury collisions have fatigue as a contributory factor. So that's in that same year, looking at that, you will be, you know, that equates to nearly 6,500 people with life-changing injuries following a collision, and almost 500 people actually losing their life. It's really important that these factors are taken into consideration when you're looking at scheduling, which sort of brings us on to the next question. I think it's really important. We've all got to make sure that we are fit to drive before we get behind a vehicle. But then looking at, you know, who's responsible in terms of the actual scheduling of a journey. Well, you have a duty of care, whether you're a manager or an employee of somebody who drives for work. And it's really, really important that you understand that driving is a work activity. So that's the same whether somebody, their whole job is working, or whether somebody is a gas fitter, a highways maintenance worker who drives to get to site and, you know, uses the van almost as a mobile toolbox. That needs risk assessing the same as any other work activity. And just in case you're not familiar with sort of the process of risk assessment, there is something called the hierarchy of control, and that's the little thing you can see there, the little triangle, inverted triangle. And the idea with this is that when you're looking at a work activity, you have to look at certain ways to reduce the risk of that activity to the person who's carrying it out. And it might be that for some jobs, some of the higher level ones aren't possible. So you always look at elimination. If driving is an absolutely crucial part of the job, then elimination obviously isn't probably applicable here. But you can certainly go down to engineering controls, and the one that I'm really going to focus on, which is the administrative controls. And really that's whoever's scheduling the driving part of the person's work. So when you look at what they're doing, there's part of the legislation that says, you know, you can be liable for something that happens because of your acts or omissions, and the risk assessment is supposed to look at that and get rid of those things. So acts could be somebody driving tired, omissions could be, you know, you may not have any sort of fatigue policy in place, or you may not consider fatigue when scheduling. So it's really important that you understand that process. And you know, driver well-being is a really huge part of this as well. And I think we have to accept that there will be times of the day, and we'll go into that a little bit further on, but where it is more risky for people to be on the road. And it might be that that is something that you have absolutely no control over in terms of the job that that person's doing. But what you can do is you can educate a driver. So you need to let drivers have the tools so that they can spot signs of fatigue, that they understand what they can do, mitigate fatigue should they start to feel tired when they're driving. And that all has got to be factored in before, you know, you put a driver out on the road, really. One of the things that I think is a bit of I think people find this a little bit of a catch-all and think, oh, well, drivers hours covers it. You know, people can only be on the road a certain amount of time. And I would agree that drivers hours is part of the puzzle, you know, so it does allow people to get breaks, and it does allow people to not drive excessive hours. But it's not just about how many hours somebody's on the road, it's about when those hours are. So when you look at, you know, saying all miles are not equal, there are peak times where we have more collisions on the road. And I think it's really important that you think about those. And again, it might not be that you can eliminate somebody completely being on the road during those times because of the work they do, but you can think about where those risky times maybe fit into their schedule. You know, is it the beginning of a shift, end of a shift? And just see if you can think about how you schedule people so that they are not on the roads if possible at those times. And that's just it there, you know, drivers more likely to crash at 3 o'clock than 10 a.m. Obviously, we'll have people on the road at 3 o'clock. It's, you know, impossible to take all vehicles off the road just because it's a dangerous time. But again, it's something that you might just want to think about when you're putting people out there. And if people have a different substantive role, so if they're not a professional driver, how long has that shift been before they then are driving back? So it's about the whole day. It's not just about the journey. It's about everything else that contributes to that working day. So there's lots of things to consider when scheduling. I think the first one for me is that you absolutely need to be realistic. And that's not saying, well, it's a 60-mile journey and we've got, it'll take about an hour, it's a 60-mile-an-hour road. It's about being realistic, you know, and understanding that different types of roads and different things can occur. School traffic is a huge one. So if you know that a route goes past the school, can you eliminate that? Because in terms of looking at that hierarchy of control before, obviously any sort of area like a school where there are lots of children milling about is quite a dangerous area for them. So, you know, maybe you can reroute it. If you can't reroute it, can you make sure that the schedule isn't around school times going in and out? Because not only will that lengthen the journey time, it will also obviously increase the risk of the driver injuring somebody else. Morning and end of day rush hours, we've all been stuck in them. You know, we all know how frustrating it can be. And I think that's, you know, one of the areas I would say if you can take those out of your day, then really you need to try and do that. Do you have something in place that tells you where roadworks are? You know, are you looking at that when you're scheduling somebody's journeys? Are you thinking about how you can reroute that? And if you can't reroute it, you know, is there any way that you can just lengthen the time that you expect that journey to take? Holidays, so, you know, summer holidays, we all know that certain routes get very, very busy. And really, I think what I'm saying is scheduling breaks and not setting the driver up to fail. So if a driver is stuck in traffic and they've got very strict scheduling times for driving, the stress levels that they feel and then the kind of resultant medical conditions that can come from that are vast. So have a think about, you know, not encouraging them to speed because you've unrealistically scheduled a journey, which will mean that if they do get stuck in traffic, as soon as they hit an open road, then there is that kind of propensity for drivers to break the speed limit to try and make up time. And also, what policies have you got in place in terms of drivers maybe missing schedules or being a little bit late? Try not to be too punitive, because that again will increase stress levels if a driver is stuck in traffic, but also will encourage them to speed, as we've just said. So what else do you need to take into consideration? Because I think it's, you know, pretty obvious when you think about the route and traffic lights and roadworks and schools and all those sort of things that probably come to mind easily. But what else is there? Well, for one thing, I think you really need to understand your driver, and really scheduling's not just about how far is it, what roads are there. It's also about that person behind the wheel. In fact, it should probably be the absolutely most important part of when you're thinking about scheduling. Has somebody just come back off maternity or paternity leave? You know, how are their sleeping patterns? Maybe you can put schedule their particular shifts in later in the day rather than early morning. People returning after sickness, you know, can you just put them back on a normal driving schedule where they may be driving 6 hours a day? Is it something that they need to work their way back into? Also, people returning after holiday. So if somebody's flight from Tenerife comes in at midnight on Sunday, you really want to put them in at 5 o'clock in the morning, you know, when you're scheduling the work. Medication, so some people take medication that affects them for a certain amount of time after they've taken it. So it's about working with your driver when you're scheduling their routes. And some drivers, either through medication or just through degenerative conditions, aren't great with night vision. So as the days are getting shorter in winter, they may struggle with those very early mornings or kind of late afternoon type shifts. You really need to understand that as well. And a really important one, and this is something that, you know, you need to really work with your communities, is religious festivals. So particularly looking around things like Ramadan, you need to factor that people can't eat or drink during sunlight hours. So is there any way that you can schedule so that people aren't going a long day without any food or any hydration and be working late in the day before it gets dark? So there are just, you know, a few. There will be many, many more than that, but I just think it's really important for you to think about the driver as your absolutely number one when scheduling, and then take all those other things into consideration. And hopefully then, you know, it will give you some tools to make sure that you schedule people to be as safe as possible. So I hope you've learned something during this, or at least it's give you some food for thought. And thank you for your attention.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lisa Dorn, and I'm going to talk to you today about the impact of journey scheduling on driver behaviour. So what is a journey schedule? Well, essentially, it's a document which the driver takes with them. It's a list of tasks that they need to carry out. It gives details of the driver and the passenger, the load, the type of vehicle. It will also include a route plan and the journey length and timings, and it should make allowances for the conditions that could affect the the progress of the vehicle, such as roadworks and so on. The journeys should also specify what the driving hour limits are and the rest periods that should be taken, and to essentially create a schedule which avoids any time pressure journeys that might lead to some kind of risk taking. And of course, avoid journeys when a driver is most likely to fall asleep, if possible. So I'd like to start by talking about the differences between driver fatigue and driver sleepiness, because those two factors often interact and people do get confused about what they are. And in terms of the research, they're often difficult to disentangle. It's also known that the causes of driver fatigue and driver sleepiness are actually somewhat different. Essentially, fatigued driving can be defined as the amount of time spent driving. And sleepy driving is often something that we can witness at certain times of the day because it's a body clock effect. Our circadian rhythms dictate that at certain times of the day we naturally want to be asleep. So fatigue driving, prolonged driving, and sleepy driving, effectively time of day effects. But as you can imagine, if you've been driving for a long time and it's a time of the day when you're most likely to be asleep, then those two factors do often work against you. So fatigue is defined as the gradual and cumulative process linked to a disinclination towards effort and degraded performance. So it's that kind of disengagement from the driving task that tends to occur with fatigue. And we do know from decades of research that fatigue resolves somewhat, not completely, but it does resolve somewhat after a period of rest. Whereas with sleepiness, it's very difficult for you to remain awake when you're carrying out activities that are actually going counter to what your body clock wants to do. And the only real way of resolving driver sleepiness is to sleep. What about the effects of driver fatigue on driving performance? Well, this again is a very well documented piece of research, not only in driving but in other kinds of operational environments such as air traffic control. And what the research has shown is that operators are particularly poor at vigilance type tasks and monitoring what's going on around them when they're tired. And it affects their decision making, affects their levels of awareness, and it slows down their reaction times. Their tracking ability is also worsened, where it's more difficult for them to monitor a vehicle that's travelling ahead, for example. And memory is affected, especially working memory. And we do need working memory when we're driving to remember where vehicles are in different locations around them. What this means is that there is a risk of errors, accidents, crashes, injuries. And when I say accidents, I'm talking about high profile catastrophic accidents like on oil rigs and so on, and also road traffic injuries as well. And they're particularly high on a night shift, and they rise with increasing shift length over an 8-hour period, especially over successive shifts, because there's a build-up of cumulative effects of sleep deprivation and fatigue. And it also increases the risk when there are not enough breaks. So that's a kind of a very brief overview of fatigue and performance type effects. Now, with regards to sleep-related and fatigue-related crashes, we can see there are different types of crashes that occur with these types of effects on the body. With sleep-related crashes, they occur more often in the early hours of the morning, especially between 2 and 6 a.m, and to a lesser extent post-lunch, 2 to 4 p.m. They tend to be run-off road type collisions where there's no braking response, and unfortunately often can happen on long straight stretches of roads like motorways. And about 20% of sleep-related crashes are injury-based. There's almost a 6-fold increase in the odds of injury crashes when you're driving at certain times of the day. And there is a particular problem with early morning commuter risk, with about 60% of sleep-related fatal crashes occurring in the first hour of driving. So clearly there's a factor with sleep deprivation as well as time of day here. And in the instrumented vehicle study that collected 43,000 hours of driving, the study over in the US called the Car 100 study found that drowsy driving led to 3 times more crashes or near crashes occurring. So that's sleep-related crashes, very much a body clock related problem and specific types of crashes. Now for fatigue-related crashes, the Department for Transport have estimated that it could be anywhere between 4 and 2% of all road fatalities are driving fatigue related, but that's likely to be an underestimation because some fatigue related crashes might be categorized as inattention or distraction. We also know that fatigue is implicated in 35% of fatal rural crashes and 12% of urban crashes. And police reports suggest that they can occur on low speed roads. And they're also more likely to be rear end type collisions, according to the insurance industry. So what seems to happen with fatigue is that there are particular problems with maintaining a headway, a safe, consistent headway. And there also seems to be problems with speed variability. Now, with regards to rest breaks, what we know is that if the driver is able to have a rest break that is timed according to their own levels of subjective fatigue, that is how they feel, rather than it being a hard and fast break, whether they're tired or not, that has the strongest influence on crash risk. So it's important that a break is structured into your journey schedule, but it should be timed according to when you need it most. And we do know that rest breaks significantly reduce the odds of crashing, especially for people driving for work. There's research showing that taking 1, 2, and 3 rest breaks ranging from 15 minutes to 2 hours over an 11-hour journey reduces the crash odds by 68%, 83% and 85% respectively. So clearly taking breaks is a safe option. But it is worth bearing in mind that breaks without sleep, so if you're both sleepy and fatigued, will only temporarily reduce fatigue, but it has little benefit for sleepy drivers. And unfortunately, many fleet drivers continue to drive and not take a rest. Perhaps they're motivated to stick to a schedule even when they've been delayed. Perhaps they're motivated to get the job done and finish for the day, or want to reach a target for a particular bonus or whatever. So there is a role here, not only in the sort of dealing with the structure and procedures around a journey schedule, but also dealing with the behaviours around how willing a driver is to continue to drive even when they're feeling tired or sleepy. So we need to assess driver fatigue and understand exactly who is most vulnerable to the problems associated with fatigue, and how we can structure the coaching situation and help people to drive with increased levels of awareness and alertness. So within driver metrics, we have a validated scale that we use, and previous evidence has shown that it predicts driver errors and lapses. It predicts fatigue on monotonous straight roads. It predicts loss of task engagement on a fatiguing or long drive where people are disinclined to mobilize any effort. And it also predicts their increased state of fatigue and tension and negative moods and interference, thoughts that come through that can generally interfere with the task of driving safely. So on a typical profile, you would see that on this profile, for example, driving fatigue is coming up as very high risk. We're also seeing a high risk score for hazard monitoring. That's to be expected because people who report high levels of vulnerability to driving fatigue are also less able to monitor hazards because of the physiological and psychological effects that fatigue have on their driving. And here we have driving focus as high risk. So for this individual, they're not using coping strategies that will help them to maintain vigilance, which would be much more protective in the driving for work situation. Driver coaching is a method for developing drivers and ensuring that they understand more about their own strengths and weaknesses, especially with regards to their individual differences in coping strategies. Some coping strategies are adaptive, that is, that they tend to improve their performance and help them get through the stress and demands of driving for work. But some are maladaptive, like we've mentioned, those people that perhaps continue to drive even when they're tired. So what Driver Metrics does is to provide individualized coaching based on the profiles, and there are over 1 million different profiles that can be generated. And this gives the fleet drivers targeted, dedicated coaching, using behavioural change techniques to influence the way that drivers think and feel about risk. And of course, that will have an impact on their behaviour. So it provides a supportive environment in which the driver can work towards meaningful goals and action, and to essentially solve the kind of problems that can occur when driving for work. The kinds of issues that would be typically covered on the coaching conversation would include willingness to disengage when driving tired, finding practical steps that can make sure that they're driving while alert, how they could avoid the temptation to carry on driving when they're tired. So these are some of the approaches that could be taken to address the behavioural factors involved in driver fatigue. So just a summary then, there are differences between sleep-related and fatigue-related problems. Research shows that there are specific risks for driving when sleepy and driving when fatigued. Rest will only temporarily relieve fatigue, and only sleep will resolve sleepiness. Journey schedules specify when people should take a break and how long they can drive for safely. But unfortunately, many drivers may ignore their physiological need to take a break and stop driving and continue to drive because of other extra motives that they have other than safe driving. So driver fatigue and sleepiness has behavioural origins, and driver coaching is a good way to help overcome some of these fatigue-related crashes that you may be experiencing. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Zano. I am a Sheikh manager for Unitrans Africa. I am based in Botswana. Botswana is a Southern African nation. I do take care of the road haulage business side in charge of the SHEC department throughout the African countries that Unitrans Africa operates in. I'm just going to share with you today some of the things that we are implementing in Unitrans Africa to better our business, to ensure that our road haulage business is running safely. And the focus of my presentation will be in line with the webinar aim of journey scheduling, routing, and impact on drivers' behavior. And my presentation is going to be entitled Planning Safer Journeys. The first item, journey management. For us, journey management, it is a planned process that we put in place so that critical safety elements from the whole process of transportation, the whole process of supply chain, delivery, to be managed systematically, objectively, and effectively. And for this to happen, we have identified three main controls of a safe journey management as follows. The first one being driving behavior and fatigue management for BVO. For us, a BVO is simply a driver. We call them BVOs because they're bulk vehicle operators. So under the driving behavior and fatigue management, we look at speed limits, harsh braking, harsh acceleration, and we also look at driving hours, working hours, the rest between shifts, and rest during shift. The second item we look at is risk management for the delivery route, looking at authorized and unauthorized routes, authorized and unauthorized stops. Then the third element will be vehicle roadworthy, where we look at vehicle pre-departure check or vehicle pre-use checklists. Part of journey management is what we call a journey management plan, which defines the controls for all the identified risks of a journey. It includes a route, a timing of the journey, rest periods and locations, and communication and security arrangements that are given to the driver before he departs for a trip. So a driver must not be dispatched for any trip without a journey management plan and without briefing on the journey management plan. So briefing takes place between the supervisor and the driver as to how he is going to travel, when he is going to rest, where he is going to stop, and so forth. So examples of the points that could be discussed between the supervisor and the driver. No deviation from route, and if any deviation, the driver must inform the office immediately. The driver must only stop at identified stops as per the journey management plan, and the driver must not leave the vehicle unattended. Our journey management plans for all the routes that we use are reviewed annually, or as and when there is a change in risk or conditions is reported back by drivers as they come back from their trips, or as our supervisors and driver trainers make their routine on-road spot checks. So if, for example, roads are under renovation, when drivers report deterioration in the state of the roads, when there are diversions due to construction work or any other works on the road, or when there are new security risks, then we do have to review the journey management plan and update it accordingly. So the journey management plan is only reviewed and edited after the driver trainer or the route risk assessor has assessed the suggested or reported changes on route in consultation with the drivers that do drive that route. So some aspects of the journey management plan, the design of the journey management plan may vary obviously from business to business, taking into account various items as per below, looking at fatigue management, health and physical fitness of the driver, the trip schedule, what is the trip distance, what are the working hours for that kind of a business, what are the driving hours allowable, and what are the rest hours. It also looks at the identified hazards on that route and the mitigations that you have put in place. It looks at the route risk assessment that has been done, the road conditions, environmental hazards, any security issues that have been raised, looks at various rest location, the travel time, the tracking of the vehicles, vehicle inspection, emergency preparedness. So all these things makes up a journey management plan. You take into account all of them. Some of the benefits that we as Unitrans have realized over the past decade of implementing journey management plans is the reduction of road crashes by more than 85% over the last decade. That is a huge, huge decrease in terms of what we were working with. We are having huge cost savings realized, huge increase to our bottom line because we're no longer looking at a lot of damages to our vehicles. Our insurance premiums have been steady and quite low compared to previous years. We also realized high vehicle utilization because when you have a journey management plan and a route that has been assessed, you identify the risks well on time, you identify any bottlenecks and work on how to mitigate those on time. Hence, when your drivers are going out, they already have everything they need to go on their trip, and they know where the challenges are and what mitigations have been put in place. You don't get hit with surprises when drivers are on the road all the time. We have reduced driver turnover. We are considered one of the best employer of choice with good working conditions because we give drivers timed rest periods. We ensure that our drivers are well rested. We monitor their driving hours, we monitor their resting hours, which is what some companies are not doing. Some companies just tell you, go move, we want you at this place tomorrow morning. We don't care if you rest or you don't rest. That is not our problem. We have seen a reduction in hijackings. In this part of Africa, hijackings are very real. But through the use of journey management plans and identification of risks on the road, we identify safe stops, safe routes to use, safe overnight parking areas, and we also identify any hijacking hotspots. So we do avoid that, and we do alert our drivers on time. We do alert our drivers during briefing before the trip. They know where to stop, where not to stop, what time to drive, and what time not to drive. We have also seen a significant reduction in road traffic fines through this program because we do use our various tracking systems, our mixed telematic systems to check on our vehicles, where they are, what speed they're driving at. If any driver is overspeeding or doing anything contrary to the law, they are either informed immediately that they have been driving overspeeding, or on return to trip, action is taken against them so that there is coaching and, if need be, disciplinary action that goes on. I've also noted that we have had significant reduction in our insurance premiums, which contributes good to the bottom line. We have had a good boost to our reputation as a business. As you know, for blue chip customers like oil companies, mining companies, a good record on safety, a good record on how you treat your drivers, a good record on your fatigue management, on your journey management goes a long way to get you more business. And we have seen elimination of fatigue-related road crashes because all our journeys are planned in such a way that drivers know and are mandated to rest after every 2.5 hours of driving or after every 200 kilometers of driving. They have to take a 15 to 20-minute break after every 200 kilometers. They must take at least 30 minutes rest break after every 5 hours of driving. Just to give you a picture of how our road crashes have reduced in the past 10 years, looking at the years 2010 to 2020, we have had massive strides towards road safety, towards reduction of road crashes. Journey management control, having control of your journeys, we believe it starts with a safe driver. So what we do monitor the driver's fatigue daily and before every shift. We ensure that the driver is well rested before embarking on a trip. This can be done by physical examination. As you see the driver come in, when you are briefing them, you can see that this guy is not rested, this guy is fatigued. Or you look at his previous working days, we do not allow our drivers to go more than 5 shifts without a day's break. By shift, I mean a day. So we are looking at 5 days, then a day of rest. 5 days on work, a day of rest. 5 days driving, a day of rest. We do ask them about their sleeping patterns as well. We educate them as to what time to sleep and how many hours to sleep as for them to manage their fatigue. Before the journey, there is briefing that is done with the driver and an agreement between the supervisor and the driver on the journey management plan to ensure that the driver understands when and where to take rest breaks. The driver must stop and take at least 15 minutes break after every 2 to 3 hours of driving. Driver must not exceed the daily duty or working hours of 14 hours. The driver must not exceed daily driving hours of 10 hours. This is all put in place to ensure that we manage fatigue and that the drivers are well rested. We do monitor the driver behavior through our vehicle tracking technology and telematics systems. We have cameras in the trucks. We do have the tracking systems that report back on harsh braking, harsh accelerating, speeding, and report back on all those driving patterns so that we can apply any consequence management for violations on the guidelines and on the parameters that we have set. And all these drivers are well trained to know what is expected of them. They do have annual refresher training on all these aspects to ensure that they are always switched up as to what is required. In terms of our speed limits, in any 100 km/h zone, our unit trans vehicles, they move at a maximum speed of 80. That is the maximum speed anyway, 80 km/h that our vehicles move. When they get into any 80 km zone, they move at a maximum speed of 60. And in any built-up areas where the speed limit for vehicles is 60, they move at a maximum speed of 40 kilometers an hour. We also believe that for us to have a safer journey, it requires use of a safe and roadworthy vehicle. It is the responsibility of the driver to perform a vehicle pre-departure or pre-use check. Before the driver leaves for a trip, he does a thorough vehicle check, 360-degree around the vehicle, or before using any vehicle, any equipment, he checks it first. This is just to ensure that the vehicle is roadworthy, is in a roadworthy condition without any serious defect that could cause road crashes. So as per procedure, the driver, after inspection, if he finds anything that is not okay on the vehicle, he must put in a defect slip to the maintenance department or to the workshops that must work on the vehicle to resolve the problem before the driver goes on the trip. If any defect is identified during the pre-trip inspection, that defect record must be filed together with the maintenance record or the proof that that defect was resolved before the vehicle goes on a trip. We also have track phones where drivers can click a number on the truck and it will contact the office immediately. That is, if he has any problems or challenges on the route. We also have panic buttons that the drivers can press in case of any emergency, mainly hijacking situations. When they press those buttons, immediately the office will know that they must be or they should be a hijacking case. Then they engage the relevant response teams to assist the drivers. So the driver must ensure that he checks the track phone before he leaves the depot. He must also check that the panic button is working before leaving the depot for the trip. And for our en route risk management, we believe that a safer journey requires use of a safe route and a good driver behavior en route. So the driver is not permitted to use, the driver is only permitted to use authorized routes for the safety and security of the driver and the vehicle. The driver is not permitted to stop their road tanker unless it is an authorized rest stop area on an approved route. So the authorized stopping areas are identified on the journey management plan that is given to the driver and the journey management plan that the driver agrees with his supervisor before leaving. The pre-approving of these stopping areas is primarily to establish safe vehicle parking areas and safe overnight stops. This is to ensure the security of the vehicle, the product, and the safety of the driver. In the event of an emergency stop, the driver must advise the supervisor about the stop immediately. The supervisor and the tracking company monitors all vehicles en route for any off-route activity, any deviation from planned stops, and any prolonged stops. Then if any stops goes beyond the required time or any driver goes off route, he is contacted by the office immediately to inquire why he's taking the wrong route, why he has gone off route. It is also emphasized that the use of cell phone or any handheld device while driving is strictly prohibited. And this is monitored also through the use of our onboard cameras to ensure that the drivers are abiding to that requirement. A safer journey requires constant communication en route. So communication is an integral part of journey management. All drivers are to be made aware during briefing session before they leave for a trip, the briefing session by the supervisor, that in case of any delay or problem en route, any delay or problem at loading site or at offloading site or at the borders, or any deviation from the prescribed route, or any changes on route plan due to road closure, police diversion or security risk, or any emergency, the driver should contact the office supporting such conditions as above. The driver also communicates with the office on arrival at planned stops, at any rest stops, loading or offloading sites. This is just to ensure that everything that has been planned as per the journey management is going on well, and if any challenges, they are immediately sorted out when the driver arrives at any certain point. That will be my presentation on managing safe journeys. Thank you so much.
That concludes the presentation section of today's webinar. A big thank you to all our speakers, Matthew, Lisa, Alison and Michael, and of course to TrackMate, our sponsors for today, for their support. I'm pleased to say that we are now joined by Matthew, Lisa and Michael for the question and answer session. But first we will look at the results of today's poll. As you should be able to see on your screen now, at the start of this webinar, we asked everyone whether their policies specify any of the following for their drivers: maximum journey distance before taking a break, maximum journey time before taking a break, and neither of these. The results show that 13% said you've got policies for journey distance, 67% have policies for journey time, and 30% of you have neither. Would any of the speakers today like to comment on this? Is this roughly in line with your own experience of working with fleets? Is it what you'd expect to see? Or is there some reason perhaps why journey time is getting more attention than journey distance? Perhaps Matthew or Michael, do you want to comment on this? You are all still on mute, I can see. If you just unmute yourselves with a microphone symbol.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Matthew. I think you just muted yourself again, though. Oh, you've gone. Lisa, it seems you're the only person who isn't experiencing technical difficulties at the minute. Do you have any thought? Have you got anything to say about the results of this poll?
Well, I think it's good to see that maximum journey time is something that fleets are taking into account in their policies, because there are so many hold-ups in the traffic situation that it's really about time rather than distance. So I think that's a good result.
Yeah, sorry, Adam. I've unmuted myself now. I did have a slight problem there. Apologies.
Fantastic.
Yeah, no, I would agree with Lisa there. It's yeah, what I would expect. But concerning Elsie, there's 30% that don't do either.
Exactly. Some room then for improvement among fleets from today's people. Hopefully they've learned something from today. Okay, in that case, we'll move on to the question and answer session for today. Let's just make sure this is all working correctly. We have got, thankfully, some questions that have come in. If I just pull this open now. We had one early on, I believe, for you, Matthew. Would you please let us know if any standards specify the driving schedule of a corporate driver? How much time should corporate drivers be allowed to drive with breaks? 9 hours, or is there any driving time rules not to exceed specific times? Do you want to repeat that?
Yeah, no, can you still hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, regards to driving times, I mean, I'm talking about the technology that we've got here. You can set up different configurations based on thresholds. So you can, depending on what type of vehicle your drivers are driving, depending on obviously legislation, depending on what country you're in, we have a solution that can technology can be set up to set up different thresholds, different driver break durations. You can even incorporate briefing times, debriefing times, loading times. So it doesn't really matter what the legislation says. Technology can obviously be adjusted to take that into account. So I hope I've answered that.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, what else we got in here? Lisa, there was a question I think that came in during your presentation. You were speaking about driver-related bonuses and things like that. Someone's asking, are driver-related bonuses illegal? This is, not sure myself.
No, driver-related bonuses are not legal, but obviously it's going to change the motivation of the driver if they have, let's say, bonuses for every delivery that they make, which is kind of typical in the gig economy. It's something that fleets should bear in mind, that when people are incentivized to stay behind the wheel when they're actually tired, that can be counterproductive.
Okay, thank you. And I think it might be worth mentioning as well that most of our speakers today are based in the UK, but obviously laws in other countries may vary. It may very well be the case that there are some restrictions on what can be done depending on where you are based as well. Michael, can you hear us today at all? I can see that you're still on mute. Oh, yes, fantastic. I can see you've switched it on there. Brilliant. You spoke a lot about your own safety policies as Unitrans. We've got some people be interested to find out what consequences might be in place for drivers who show non-compliance with some of the policies and procedures you do have.
Oh, thanks, Adam, for that. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. There are various consequences that we have put in place for our disciplinary procedure as well to manage violations and non-conformance to these set rules and standards. But before I get into that, I think it's very important for everyone to understand that the goal is not to get rid of any drivers or to get rid of any employees, because as you know in business, training up a driver to the quality and to the point of where you can trust him to go with a load and back. Some of them, they do carry millions and millions of product on the vehicles. It's a costly thing. So we wouldn't want to lose drivers. So the consequence begins with cancelling, a bit of suspension without pay. If it is gross negligence, that could have led to a road crash and, of course, maybe lives being lost, then it may lead to someone losing their job or even being prosecuted if the evidence is there that it was negligent behavior that led to such a road crash. So they do vary, the consequences that are put in place. You start with counseling, you start with coaching, if it is defensive driving and other things. You go into normal disciplinary procedures of written warnings, final written warnings, then of course dismissal if it means that it comes to that.
Okay, thank you, Michael. I hope you find that informative and helpful as well. Another question here for Matthew now. What are your opinions on the theory that driver stress is increased due to consistent monitoring of vehicles, resulting in added pressure to perform at highly productive levels throughout the day? Lisa, you might be placed away on this as well, I suppose.
Is that for me, Adam?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I think technology is there to help the driver, as we've just shown and spoken about. So, you know, any company or any driver that believes technology is there to be a big brother and affects the driver in a negative way, well, that needs to be addressed by training and reassurance that that's not the case. You know, technology is there to improve driver safety and to improve the well-being of the driver. So it's just about education to the driver. That would be my answer to that question.
Yes, and I would agree with that too, that actually telematics, if it's used correctly, is incredibly useful for monitoring driver behaviour in a dynamic way and providing feedback to drivers to help them to drive safer. Clearly, you know, if a driver is feeling stressed because they're being monitored, then my question would be, why? Because it suggests that perhaps they're having to change their behaviour, and that might be something that they find quite demanding.
I wonder, Michael, is this something you might have experienced as well at Unitrans, drivers reporting feeling stressed due to any monitoring that's being done for safety reasons? Are there any case studies you might be able to talk about of whether that's the case in your experience, and if so, how you've dealt with it?
Yeah, that is the experience, I think, all over, Adam. The recent experience that we experienced was the introduction of onboard cameras. You know, they record everything that the driver is doing on board, and also they have a lens that is facing the road to show what's going on the road. So there was a bit of backlash, and a lot of drivers even threatened to go on strike, not to come to work and stop work because of that. But eventually, as time moved on, we had crashes where third parties came into our vehicles, and those videos came out to save the driver in terms of prosecution. The evidence was there as to what actually happened on the road, and that started to change that mindset to say, look, this technology actually helps you a lot. If your behavior is as good as you are being trained, you won't have a problem with it.
Great, thank you very much for that answer. So we'll move on now to another question. Again, Matthew, will engagement with TrackMate's app be classed as distracted driving, and the monitoring of driving behaviours be counterproductive?
No, if the driver's app, the device that's being used, as long as it's obviously being used in a legal way, so it's not mounted on a dashboard, and it's in a place that's safe to use, then and it's legal to use, then not at all. It's there to assist the driver. Technology is there to help the driver and to take that stress away. We've all used satellite navigations in our vehicle. And that certainly helps when you're driving through somewhere that you're not familiar with. So it's very similar to that.
Great, yeah, that's yeah. Sorry, we have another question just coming. I was getting distracted by reading that one as it came through. Speaking of distraction, this is one that yeah, we'll put this through to all three of you if you feel you want to have anything to say about it, because it's not directed to anyone specific as far as I can tell. How would you go about scheduling driver breaks when working in a city like London, or I suppose anywhere, with lots of traffic and where parking is going to be very difficult? I suppose drivers might, struggle with finding somewhere to park. If that's going to be disrupting their schedules, what can be done about adapting things to that?
Well, do you want me to answer, Adam, or to have an opinion?
Yeah, sure thing, if you want to.
Yeah, so again, if we take technology, especially if you're looking at a driver that's has a multi-drop job, so they're dropping off in London. Obviously, we all know it's very difficult to park in London. It's all very difficult to manoeuvre. So actually, within our technology, you can put in there, you can decide when the driver thresholds and when the driver needs to take a break, or after how long of continuous driving should a driver have to take a break. So we can set that up, and our planning tool, so the optimization, will plan that break in to the route. So it's all done. Basically, the technology is there to plan the route, take into consideration those manifests the working time profiles that you've set up, and then include them into the break at a safe time.
Great, thank you. Lisa or Michael, I just want to get any further comments on that.
Yeah, I would say that one of the advantages here with the technology would be that you could keep an eye on things like traffic congestion and structure it in such a way that the breaks happen when the driver isn't able to make much progress anyway. And if the breaks can be organised in a way that is kind of like a range of times, a range of a time that they could take that break, then it could fit very nicely into what I was talking about in my presentation around subjective fatigue. You know, how there should be some flexibility in when the breaks are taken according to how the driver feels.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. I think we've got someone submitted here something it might be worth highlighting, that the things we're talking about today might not be applicable everywhere. In Portugal, our lawyers tell us it is not possible to have telematics about driver behaviour. They can't use the information about drivers due to data protection reasons, apparently. Unless there aren't any further questions that you would like to ask to our speakers today, we will wrap up today's presentation. I see there's one about having access to the slides from today. Unfortunately, we don't publish the individual speaker slides. However, the recording of today's event will go live on Brake's YouTube channel and on the Global Fleet Champions page as well tomorrow. So you'll be able to find the entire event there if you want to watch it back or share it with people. Just in case, if there's no further questions, I would like to move on and just thank again our speakers for all their time today. Huge thank you to Matthew, Lisa, Alison, who sadly couldn't join us for this presentation, and of course to Michael for his case study sharing their work with Unitrans, and of course to our sponsors, TrackMate, for all their support with today's event. If you'd like to continue any of the conversations that we've had today, you can do so on our social media channels. Sorry, Global Fleet Champions is on Twitter and on LinkedIn. You can find us there. We also have upcoming webinars on further road safety related topics. Next month, on July 6th, we are running a webinar on tackling drug driving. On the 28th of September, we will be doing a webinar talking about community outreach. And in November as well, we will be another event on vehicle procurement and maintenance. If any of those subjects are of interest to you today, you can sign up now on our website for them. Yeah, that concludes today's presentation. Once again, a thank you to our speakers and to our sponsors. We hope you found some information today that you can all use to work towards our shared goal of safe and healthy mobility in fleets. Thank you for your time again. The webinar will now conclude.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.